Hello. If you've ever found yourself working too hard just to be loved, accepted, or simply not abandoned, this video is for you. We've spent too long in a world that teaches us our worth lies in others' eyes. That love, applause, or outside attention defines who we are. But the more we chase it, the further we drift from ourselves. The more we try to be loved, the more we abandon our truth. Today, I invite you to return to the only place that truly matters, within. This video is not motivation. It's a wake-up call. A call to step off the stage, take off the mask, and reclaim the one thing no one can give you but you, inner peace. Not everyone is ready for truth. But if you're tired of pleasing, tired of performing, tired of living a life for other people's comfort, then you're ready. Stay until the end. Because the final lesson in this video might just be the first step back to yourself. 1. The hidden cost of emotional attachment. How many times have you woken up with a heavy heart just because someone didn't reply to your message? How many days have been dictated by someone's silence, their indifferent expression, or a single dismissive phrase? How many times have you compromised, stepped back, reshaped yourself, just to hold on to someone who may not even want to stay? This is not about love anymore. This is about control. The real question is not how deeply you loved, but how much of yourself you lost in the process. We are raised in a world that glorifies unconditional love, sacrifice, and loyalty, but rarely teaches us about the quiet price we pay when we let emotions hijack our minds. Because the moment your peace, your joy, and your sense of worth depend on another person's behavior or presence, you are no longer the author of your own story. You've given that pen away. Emotional attachment is not love. Love is freedom. Attachment is dependency. It's the belief that you cannot feel whole unless someone else validates your existence. It's when your well-being is chained to someone else's attention. It's when you live in a cycle of hope, waiting for them to change, to understand, to return. Every thought that circles around them, every action taken to hold on, is another layer of control you've surrendered, voluntarily and silently. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. But most of us live in reverse. We give others power over our minds, and we call it love. We let their approval shape our value. Their indifference dictates our emotional weather. Their silence becomes the architect of our inner storm. We're not living, we're waiting. Waiting for their attention, their apology, their return. The truth is this: no one is coming to rescue you from this state. No apology, no late-night message, no dramatic reunion will give back the parts of you you've lost, unless you decide to stop. Because attachment is always rooted in fear. Fear of abandonment. Fear of not being enough. Fear of being alone. And when fear leads, you don't choose, you react. You don't love them, you seek yourself through them. That's the illusion. And it's a dangerous one. Because every time you act from that space, you reinforce a false idea that someone else holds the key to your peace. But they don't. You do. You must understand this deeply. They are not hurting you. Your attachment to them is. They may be distant, cold, or absent. But it's your choice to let that disrupt your peace. That choice, unconscious as it may feel, is yours. And acknowledging that is your first step toward reclaiming power. You don't need anyone to feel complete. You need the strength to refuse sacrificing yourself for what's out of your control. Emotions are signals, not commands. Missing someone doesn't mean they belong in your life. Feeling pain doesn't mean you should chase. Feeling empty doesn't mean you're broken. These are just sensations, not facts. Let them pass. Observe them. But don't obey them. You are not the abandoned one. You are not the hurt one. You are not your wounds. You are the one growing through them. The one awakening. The one who is remembering their worth, piece by piece, silence by silence, choice by choice. Every time you resist the urge to reach out, to explain yourself, to beg for closure, you're rebuilding yourself. Not from scratch, but from sovereignty. No one else will teach you this. No book, no therapist, no external voice can substitute for the moment you look in the mirror and say, enough. I choose me now. No one can throw you off balance unless you give them that power. Remember that. Let it anchor you when your mind feels scattered. Let it steady you when the longing returns. This isn't about not feeling, it's about not being ruled by feeling. You've given enough. You've heard enough. Now is the time to reclaim what is sacred, your mind. 2. Why detachment is not indifference, but power. One of the most common misconceptions we carry is this: to emotionally detach from someone, from a situation, or from a memory, means becoming cold, heartless, or lacking empathy. People might say, "You've changed," or "Why are you so distant now?" Or worse, "You don't care anymore." And because we fear being misunderstood or judged, we often keep holding on, long after we're tired, long after we've broken inside, long after there's nothing left to hold. But the truth is this: emotional detachment is not indifference. It is a quiet and deeply personal form of power that only those who've been wounded understand. You don't need to shout. You don't need to slam doors, erase memories, or shut down your heart to appear strong. You only need one thing: to stop letting emotion run your life. That's the essence of true detachment. Not the suppression of feeling, but the placement of it, behind reason, behind peace, behind your core values. Because if you don't, you will be swept away. You will let a look, a message, a moment of silence derail your entire sense of self. You will live in constant anticipation, waiting for someone to change, to return, to understand. And while you wait, you are not living. You are pausing your growth, compromising your clarity, and trading your sovereignty for the illusion of connection. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care enough about yourself not to abandon your inner calm for something, or someone, that isn't certain. You still love, but you do not lose yourself. You still empathize, but you do not destroy yourself for validation. You still feel, but you do not let your feelings paralyze your decisions. In Stoic philosophy, this is one of the most vital practices, to know the difference between what you can control and what you must release. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Master your mind, for it alone is yours. Everything else is illusion." And the reality is, many of us are holding on to illusions that someone will save us, that a relationship will complete us, that a perfect past will somehow return. But you don't need someone to save you. You just need to stop harming yourself with expectations. Real strength is when you can stand in the storm of emotion, and not react. When you can feel the sting of disappointment, and still choose grace. When you can say, "I care for you, but I choose myself." That's not cold. That's clarity. It doesn't need explanation. It doesn't need defense. It's the calm power of someone who no longer needs to be loved in order to be whole. True emotional detachment doesn't close your heart, it sharpens your boundaries. You can still show up for others, still support them, still understand their pain, but you no longer let it consume you. You no longer allow yourself to be dragged into emotional chaos. You love without ownership. You listen without losing yourself. You give without draining. There are people who use detachment to escape. They shut down, avoid feeling, and pretend not to care. That's not Stoicism. That's numbness. Stoicism teaches you to feel fully, to understand deeply, and then to choose wisely. You can miss someone and still not call them. You can remember and still not return. That's not contradiction, it's freedom. The greatest freedom in life isn't having everything, it's needing nothing to be at peace. When you release the need for outcomes, you begin to see reality more clearly. You see people as they are, not as you hope they'll become. You see situations as they unfold, not as you wish they'd unfold. From that clarity, you make decisions not from fear, but from truth. No one teaches us this. Society tells us to keep trying, to keep sacrificing, to keep hoping. But few ever say, letting go is also a form of love, especially the love you give to yourself. Not everyone who walks away is wrong. Not everyone who stays is right. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do, for yourself and for them, is to stop holding on. The Stoic isn't someone who turns to stone. They are someone who grows roots. They remain grounded in storms, steady in chaos, but still open to sun and wind. They are still moved by beauty, but not broken by disappointment. They are not reactive, they are responsive. Not emotionally detached, but emotionally sovereign. So next time someone tells you you're cold for not chasing, not pleading, not explaining, remember this: you're not cold. You're conscious. You are not running from feeling, you are refusing to be ruled by it. Emotional detachment is not the end of love, it is the beginning of mature love. Love that doesn't demand. Love that doesn't control. Love that doesn't need to be returned to be real. A love that begins, first and foremost, within you. Pause and ask yourself, what am I clinging to that is built on uncertainty? And if I let go, will I lose myself? Or will I finally return to who I was before the attachment? The answer won't come through logic. It will come through the lightness you feel when you finally choose peace over resistance. When you stop chasing clarity from others and start becoming it yourself. That is the power of detachment. It doesn't scream. It doesn't seek approval. It simply walks away, with quiet strength and unwavering direction. Because you now know, anything that needs to be forcefully held was never yours. And anything that remains when you release, is what was true all along. 3. Marcus Aurelius and the Discipline of the Mind. You have power over your mind, not outside events. This sentence from Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic philosophers and Roman emperors, may seem simple at first glance. But it is not just advice, it is a confrontation. It cuts straight through modern thought patterns and forces us to answer a fundamental question: who really governs your inner world, you or the world around you? Think back to all the times you felt anger because someone treated you poorly. The times you were thrown off balance by a message that never came, by a plan that fell through, or a comment that struck a nerve. Those feelings didn't arise from the events themselves, they came from how your mind interpreted those events. That's the essence of Stoic insight. The problem is not the world, but your judgment about the world. When you lack discipline of the mind, every external event has the power to control your peace. A passing glance can wreck your confidence. A small mistake can make you feel worthless. A delayed response can consume your entire day. Not because you're weak, but because no one ever taught you to take back control of your perception. Marcus was not a philosopher in retreat. He was a ruler who faced war, betrayal, plague, and deep personal loss. And yet, amidst the chaos of an empire, he wrote daily reflections, reminding himself not to be impulsive, not to let emotion lead, not to allow the world to dictate his inner state. That wasn't cold detachment. That was mental discipline. Discipline of the mind does not mean you stop feeling. It means you feel deeply and still choose your response. You can feel hurt and still speak with kindness. You can feel pressure and still remain steady. You can feel anger and still not act out of it. That is the difference between being a prisoner of emotion and being a conscious participant in your own life. The phrase, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," is the cornerstone of personal freedom. In a world that constantly floods you with opinions, distractions, noise, and artificial standards, you discover that the rarest and most powerful skill is to master your own mind. The person who can command their thoughts no longer needs others to feel worthy, no longer crumbles under criticism, no longer lives on emotional autopilot. Once you internalize this, your entire way of being begins to shift. You stop chasing validation. You stop fearing disapproval. You stop reacting to everything. Why? Because you realize that the only conversation that truly shapes your life is the one happening silently within your own mind. And you don't gain this mental discipline through a one-time decision. It is trained daily, like a muscle. Every time you're provoked is an opportunity to practice stillness. Every time you want to argue is a moment to choose silence. Every time you want to quit is a chance to remember who you are. Mental discipline is not an instinct. It is a conscious, repeated choice made by someone who has tasted freedom. But let's be clear, discipline of the mind doesn't mean suppressing emotions. That creates a pressure cooker that will eventually explode. What it means is identifying your emotions, bringing them into awareness, and placing them under the light of reason. It's saying, "I feel anger. But I know if I act from this place, I may destroy something I value." The moment you can see your thought before it becomes an action, you regain power. No one can truly hurt you unless you allow them into your mind. No event can ruin your day unless you assign meaning to it. Everything depends on one question: what power am I giving this thing over my inner world? The discipline lies in saying, "This is my emotion, but I am not this emotion. I witness it, I understand it, and I choose my response." Marcus Aurelius lived by that. Even as emperor, he didn't write to impress others. He wrote to remind himself, over and over again, not to be pulled from his center. His journal, Meditations, wasn't a book for public praise. It was his personal tool for staying grounded. And if he, leading armies, running an empire, had to remind himself of these truths daily, what excuse do we have not to do the same? You will never control this world. People will disappoint you. Plans will fail. The unexpected will always come. But if you control your mind, you control your experience. That is true power. That is the one thing no one can take from you. And you don't wait for peace to train this discipline. You train it precisely in the midst of the storm. Because it is in the storm that you learn how deep your roots go. It is in discomfort that your clarity sharpens. It is in crisis that your foundation is tested. True freedom is not doing whatever you want. It is doing what is right even when your feelings push against it. It is choosing stillness over reaction, values over impulses, stability over chaos. And if there's one thing you carry forward from Marcus Aurelius, let it be this: you have power over your mind, not outside events. Live that truth, and you've already begun to live free. 4. Identify the hooks. What controls you controls your peace. There's a truth most people are unwilling to face: you're not suffering because of life itself. You're suffering because of invisible hooks you refuse to unhook. And what are these hooks? They are the people you can't stop thinking about, the messages you're constantly hoping for, the praise you desperately seek, the perfect image of yourself you keep chasing, the habits you know are draining you, yet you continue anyway. Each of these hooks, if not identified and released, becomes a silent thread pulling you away from your present moment, and stealing your sovereignty. Stoicism is not just a theory you admire. It's a lifestyle that begins with a piercingly honest question: what is controlling you right now without your awareness? This isn't a gentle reflection. It's an uncomfortable confrontation. Because you can't master your mind if you don't first realize what is manipulating it. You can't build peace if you're still tethered to the very things that disrupt it. Stop consuming more information for a moment, and look inward. Take a sheet of paper and ask yourself, whose attention determines your mood? What habits are destroying your clarity but you still cling to? Whose approval weakens your convictions? What expectations make you feel perpetually inadequate? What, if taken from you, would leave you feeling empty, lost, or unworthy? Every answer on that list is a hook, a false anchor you're depending on. And each hook comes at a cost. You give away your peace to something you can't control. You're no longer centered in your own life. You become reactive, a mere reflection of the world's behavior. When someone pulls away, you spiral. When plans go off track, you crumble. Not because you're fragile, but because you haven't yet reclaimed the strings of your own mind. You don't have to sever all ties at once. But you do have to name the things that hold power over you. Because until you do, you will mistake your emotional dependence for normal. You'll think it's normal to lose sleep over unread messages. Normal to feel anxious without praise. Normal to believe your worth depends on how others treat you. But that's a lie. That's the behavior of someone who has handed the keys to their peace over to the external world. If someone can make or break your mood just by showing up or not, it's not because they're powerful. It's because you gave them power. If a certain expectation keeps making you feel like you're never good enough, it's not because you're failing. It's because you're following standards that were never truly yours. If a habit leaves you feeling hollow every time you do it, it's not because you're weak. It's because you haven't fully faced what emotional need that habit is masking. And once you list those hooks down, you will see a brutal truth. You're living too much for others, for impressions, for outcomes, for control, and far too little for yourself. That's why you're tired. Not because life is cruel, but because you're leaking energy every day into things that don't nourish you. There's a powerful meditation image worth remembering. Your mind is a still lake. Every hook is like a stone dropped into that water. Just one can disrupt the clarity. And if you constantly allow others to throw stones into your lake, you'll never be able to see through to the bottom. Stillness doesn't come from silence in the world. It comes from removing the things that agitate your inner waters. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "They can injure you only with your consent. They may act wrongly, but you are the one who decides how it affects you." And that only becomes real when you recognize the hook that's being pulled. One rejection may not hurt another person, but it destroys you. Why? Because it strikes the hook called, "I'm not enough." And here's the shift, you can't unhook by avoiding. You must face it. Name it. Ask yourself, do I really want this to continue ruling over me? If the answer is no, then the work begins. You stop reacting the moment you're provoked. You stop trusting every feeling that floods your chest. You stop letting someone else's mood define your direction. Every time you resist the pull, you're taking the power back into your own hands. Understand this, no one can give you peace if your peace is still attached to so many hooks. Peace doesn't come when people treat you well. It comes when you stop depending on their treatment to feel stable. It comes when your emotions are no longer programmed by things beyond your control. And once you start unhooking, slowly, deliberately, you notice a shift. You don't get rattled so easily. You're no longer euphoric when praised, or devastated when dismissed. You begin to live like a person who stands in the middle of the storm and still breathes with calm. That's not coldness. That's mastery. The world will always test you. But no external storm can shake you if it doesn't hit a hook inside you. And that is your greatest work, to unhook what pulls you, so you can reclaim what anchors you. Because what controls you, controls your peace. And what you reclaim, sets you free. 5. Ego as the root of emotional dependence. There's a painful but undeniable truth. What makes us cling to others most deeply is not love, it's ego. It's not that we love too much, but that we can't bear the feeling of being rejected, forgotten, or deemed unimportant. We think we're attached because we care, but the reality is, we're entangled because our ego is wounded. The ego is deceptive. It wears the mask of loyalty, of deep affection, of wanting the best for the other person. But if you look closely, with full awareness, you'll realize, sometimes, you're not hurting because you lost them, you're hurting because you lost your image in their eyes. Not because they left, but because you no longer feel needed. Not because they became distant, but because being dismissed bruised your sense of identity. That's not love. That's the reaction of a fragile ego. True love is born from inner fullness. You love not because someone completes you, but because you want to share what is already whole. You love not to possess, but to witness, to understand, to walk beside someone freely. But when the ego takes control, everything becomes distorted. You start loving to own, loving to validate, loving to be seen, acknowledged, or to prove that you're worthy. The ego cannot handle ambiguity. It despises silence. It panics when it doesn't get a response. It interprets stillness as rejection. It views failure as humiliation. It turns every minor shift into a personal attack. And so, the ego keeps you constantly defensive, needing to know what others think, needing to ensure you're not losing, needing to protect its pride. The irony is this: the stronger the ego, the weaker you become. Because you're ruled by fear, fear of being diminished, abandoned, misjudged. That fear fuels a toxic form of attachment. You don't love them, you need them. You need them to feel complete. You need them to avoid facing the emptiness within. You need them to keep a version of yourself alive that you haven't yet questioned. That's why, after a breakup, many people don't mourn the relationship. They mourn the loss of how they were seen in it. They grieve the loss of being someone's everything. They miss the role, the validation, the reflection of importance. They say they gave too much, but what really hurts is that they compromised their self-respect just to keep a fragile ego intact. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone hurts you, it's a chance to see yourself more clearly." In relationships, when your ego is hurt, it's a signal, a mirror, a brutal but enlightening moment to ask, am I truly loving, or am I leaning on this person to avoid facing my own gaps? Am I connected, or just afraid of abandonment? True love doesn't create dependency. It doesn't make you insecure, possessive, or controlling. It doesn't demand constant reassurance. It doesn't fear space. It doesn't need a script. It gives freely. It releases freely. Emotional dependence, on the other hand, is the child of an unhealed ego. It grows out of past wounds, abandonment, comparison, rejection, that haven't been fully acknowledged. So we enter relationships like beggars looking for salvation. We place the burden of our happiness on others. We hand them the keys to our emotional regulation, then blame them when the structure falls. Stoicism teaches a powerful principle: distinguish between true emotion and ego-driven reaction. True emotion is quiet, calm, and unconditional. Ego is loud, reactive, and always needing control. When you feel a compulsion, texting, chasing, explaining, proving, pause and ask, is this love, or fear disguised as love? And if you look deep enough, you'll see Ego only survives in the dark. The moment you bring it into the light, it begins to dissolve. When you can say, "I'm hurt because I feel unworthy without their presence," you start detaching. Not by force, but by truth. By returning to the inner fullness that never really left you. Healing the ego doesn't mean killing it. It means maturing it. It means letting it serve you, not rule you. It means giving it a proper seat at the table, without letting it take the throne. And you can't do that if you're still using relationships as a way to validate your worth. Remember, you don't need anyone to confirm your value. The fact that you are alive, conscious, aware, that's already proof enough. Everything else is just experience, not definition. And once you step out of the ego's trap, something remarkable happens. You can still love deeply, still connect sincerely, but you no longer suffer from absence. You no longer react out of fear. You choose from clarity. You give from overflow. And when you walk away, you do so in peace, not bitterness or guilt. That is the sign of a mind free from ego. No longer attached out of fear. No longer in love with illusion. No longer dependent to feel enough. You don't need to eliminate your ego. You only need to look it in the eye, and stop letting it control your life. 6. The illusion of control in modern relationships. One of the most common, and dangerous, illusions in modern relationships is this. I can save them. I can keep them. I can make them change if I just love hard enough. This illusion is sweet, romantic, and often glorified by pop culture as a sign of true love. But it's a dangerous lie, a fast path to losing yourself. You cannot save someone who is committed to their own suffering. You cannot keep someone who is still searching for themselves. You cannot change someone whose transformation doesn't come from within. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it." The problem isn't that someone pulled away, acted coldly, or caused you pain. The real problem is how you respond. If you cling to the illusion that you can control the outcome, you will be crushed every time reality does not align with your expectations. We tell ourselves, "If I just become better, they'll see my worth. If I stay patient, they'll come back. If I give more, they'll finally appreciate me." But the harsh truth is this: people only change when they want to. They only stay when they feel connected. They only value you when they are awake enough to see your worth. No one wakes up for you. No one heals for you. No one stays just because you deserve it. If you haven't realized this truth, you'll lose yourself in the exhausting project of trying to fix others. You'll turn love into a performance. You'll suppress your needs, lower your standards, abandon your boundaries, all to hold on to a version of someone that may no longer exist. And little by little, you'll break. Not because of them, but because you locked yourself into the fantasy that you had the power to decide how it ends. But you don't. You only have one power: how you respond to what's happening. You can choose to release or to grasp, to stay awake or to fall into denial, to grow or to loop. That choice, that response, is what defines you, not the situation itself. The illusion of control is rooted in the fear of loss. When we can't tolerate uncertainty, we act. We try to fix, to explain, to hold tighter, as if doing more could save what's slipping away. But it never does. The more you grip, the more exhausted you become. The more you try to control, the more anxious you feel. The more you try to save someone, the more you lose your essence. What you need is not another strategy to keep someone. What you need is the clarity to know when to stop. Not the skill to persuade, but the courage to accept reality. Not the strength to change them, but the discipline to shift your own reaction. Marcus Aurelius once reminded, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And the way you estimate a relationship should be based on truth, not on hope. You cannot love someone fully if you cannot accept that they have the freedom to leave. You cannot know peace if your inner stability depends on someone unstable. To practice Stoicism in love does not mean to become cold or detached. It means knowing the boundary between responsibility and control. You are responsible for your actions, not for their feelings, their choices, or their readiness. They may need to go through mistakes, through distance, through chaos to find themselves, and you don't have the right to take that away, no matter how deeply you love them. You don't save someone by carrying them. You save them by letting them carry themselves. You don't keep someone by tolerating everything. You keep them by being clear, so that if they stay, it's a conscious choice, not the result of your control. And if they choose to walk away, you remain whole. Because your self-worth was never placed in their hands. You remain peaceful. Because you are not living based on the uncontrollable. You keep moving. Because you understand, the only person you can truly save is yourself. The illusion of control opens the door to all emotional suffering. The truth is the only way to freedom. 7. Stillness versus reaction, choosing response over instinct. How many times have you said something you later regretted? How many times have you sent a long emotional message, only to wish you could unsend it moments later? How many decisions have you made in anger, fear, or panic that cost you your peace, your dignity, or your relationships? It's not because you're unkind. Not because you're unintelligent. It's because you lacked one thing, the pause. You lack the discipline to insert space between reaction and intentional response. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are angry, you are the one who is hurt, not the other person." That's not just wisdom, it's instruction. In every situation, you have a choice: act from instinct or act from awareness. One is impulsive. The other is deliberate. One is chaos. The other is clarity. One gives your power away. The other brings it back. Instinct is fast. It's wired for survival. When you feel threatened by a cold look, a harsh word, or silence, your brain flips into defense mode. You want to lash out, to explain, to prove, to protect. And that's precisely when you say or do something that breaks trust, breaks peace, or breaks you. The real power lies in pausing for just 3 seconds. 3 seconds may seem small, but it's an internal revolution. 3 seconds to breathe. To notice the surge of emotion. To ask yourself, what am I actually feeling? What do I really want right now? If I say or do this, what will come next? That pause is the line between being led and being the one leading. Between victimhood and sovereignty. Between reaction and response. Stoicism doesn't ask you to be emotionless. It asks you to delay reaction long enough to choose your response. Every time you pause, even for a moment, you rewire your nervous system. You train your brain not to see every conflict as a threat. You teach yourself, I am no longer a slave to my emotions. Imagine an emotional wave rising like a tide. You can jump in, or you can stand still, observe, let it rise and fall. In stillness, you begin to see clearly, it wasn't them who hurt you, it was your interpretation of their actions. It wasn't the words, they just triggered old pain, old beliefs, unhealed parts. Every emotional outburst has a deeper root. And if you don't pause to trace it, you'll keep living reactively, never truly free. The 3-second pause isn't just a technique. It's a philosophy of living. You apply it not just in conflict, but in every moment of decision. Before you spend money, pause. Before you respond to a message, pause. Before you say something sharp, pause. Ask yourself, am I acting from ego or from principle? And it's in this pause that stillness emerges. Not the silence of the outside world, but the grounded quiet within. You no longer let emotions drive. You start to steer. You stop trying to fix others. You start correcting yourself. You don't chase or attack, you reflect, clarify, and protect the one thing that matters most, your inner peace. The person who cannot pause lives in constant emotional turbulence. The one who pauses owns a quiet kind of power. They can move through conflict without collapse. They can sit in uncertainty without losing their center. They choose peace, not because it's easy, but because it's who they've become. And this is not innate. It is discipline. Every time you choose stillness over instinct, you carve a new mental pathway. Every time you withhold reaction, you reinforce an identity of self-command. Over time, you become someone who is no longer easily shaken. The weak react. The strong wait. The insecure lash out. The mature speak with clarity. The unconscious repeat their wounds. The aware begin to heal. Stillness is not the absence of emotion. It's the refusal to be ruled by emotion. You see, but you don't flinch. You feel, but you don't submit. You respond, not to win, but to remain rooted in truth, in dignity, in peace. And it all begins with one small decision. Pause for 3 seconds. 8. The practice of emotional fasting. We're all familiar with the concept of fasting, refraining from food to cleanse the body, eliminate toxins, and regenerate energy. But few people talk about a deeper kind of fasting, emotional fasting. This isn't suppression, nor is it denial. It's a deliberate, conscious pause. A refusal to act on every emotional impulse. A practice of cleansing the mind from excessive reactions and reclaiming sovereignty over your inner world. Emotional fasting does not mean being emotionless. On the contrary, those who practice it feel deeply, but they do not allow every wave of feeling to dictate their actions. They do not explode at every offense, beg for attention at every slight, or unravel at every silence. Instead, they observe. They breathe. They choose stillness where others would react. They understand that not every feeling deserves a voice. Some simply need to be witnessed and released. In today's overstimulated world, emotional fasting is more necessary than ever. We're bombarded by notifications, expectations, opinions, and comparisons. And so we react, angry when misunderstood, anxious when ignored, insecure when not validated. We confuse reactivity with authenticity. We think we're expressing ourselves, when in reality, we're leaking control. Emotional fasting is the art of saying no to your first reaction. It's choosing not to text when you're angry. Not to defend yourself when it's pointless. Not to chase when someone pulls away. Not because you're weak, but because you refuse to feed the chaos. The emotionally disciplined do not suppress their feelings, they simply refuse to be ruled by them. Each time you choose silence over reaction, you purify something inside you. Each time you breathe instead of retaliating, you heal something old. Each time you sit with sadness without trying to fix it, you create a sacred space, where emotions become messengers, not masters. The practice of emotional fasting is a journey. There are no shortcuts. At first, it's hard. The anger will demand to be heard. The fear will beg you to act. The urge to be understood will scream for attention. But if you are brave enough to do nothing, to simply observe, you will feel a different power rising. Quiet, but unshakable. subtle, but sovereign. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are angry, it is your own pain, not theirs. So turn inward." Instead of asking, "Why did they do this?" ask, "Why does this shake me?" Observe without judgment. Breathe without speaking. Stand still while every emotion pushes you to move. And then you will see, not everything deserves your reaction. You don't need to defend every misunderstanding. You don't need to be constantly validated. Peace isn't about controlling others, it's about freeing yourself from the need to. As you practice emotional fasting regularly, your life will shift. You'll feel lighter, clearer. You'll stop being pulled into every small drama. You'll know who you are, what you value, and what deserves your energy. You won't need to win, you'll simply choose to remain aligned. You won't need to be louder, you'll simply remain grounded. That's not coldness. That's emotional maturity. And in today's world, that is a quiet revolution. 9. Voluntary discomfort, a Stoic weapon against detachment. In a world that glorifies comfort as the ultimate measure of success, deliberately choosing discomfort seems almost irrational. But for the Stoics, discomfort was not something to be feared or avoided, it was a path to freedom. Emotional dependency doesn't break through logic or motivation, it breaks when you face the very things you fear losing. That's the purpose of voluntary discomfort, placing yourself in controlled deprivation to reclaim your power. Seneca once advised his students to live for several days like the poor, to eat little, to wear rough clothes, to sleep in cold or bare surroundings. He wasn't promoting suffering. He was cultivating resilience. If you can live without what you're most afraid to lose, then you are no longer enslaved by it. That's the quiet revolution that happens when you practice voluntary discomfort. You realize that the object of your dependency isn't essential. And that truth begins to loosen the grip of your attachments. Most of our pain doesn't come from hardship itself, but from the fear of losing what makes us feel safe, wanted, or admired. People don't truly fear being poor, they fear the loss of status that comes with it. They don't fear solitude, they fear the implication of being unwanted. They don't fear failure, they fear being seen as inadequate in the eyes of others. Discomfort exposes those fears. It tears the illusion wide open. When you sleep on the floor instead of a bed, you're not just toughening your body, you're whispering to your psyche, even if comfort is taken away, I remain myself. When you spend a day offline, you're not just avoiding distractions, you're showing yourself that your worth doesn't come from digital validation. When you fast, not out of necessity but discipline, you're training the most powerful voice inside you, the one that says, I choose what guides me, not my cravings. The principle doesn't stop with the physical. It deepens when applied to emotional terrain, where modern attachment hides best. Imagine this: You resist the urge to reply immediately to a message just to prove you're still wanted. You sit with anxiety instead of soothing it with unnecessary connection. You stay silent in the face of misunderstanding, not out of passivity, but power. You let someone walk away without running after them. These are not weaknesses. They are voluntary discomforts of the emotional kind, each one a blade that cuts through the strings of attachment. It's uncomfortable. Deeply. But discomfort is the price of transformation. Every time you delay gratification, every time you pause the reflex to seek comfort, you grow. You turn toward your own strength. You no longer react, you choose. You no longer grip, you release. And in that release, you realize how light freedom feels. The point of discomfort is not suffering, it is liberation. Voluntary discomfort teaches you that you do not need the things you thought you couldn't live without. Someone who has tasted solitude no longer fears abandonment. Someone who has sat in silence no longer chases noisy validation. Someone who has walked without certainty no longer panics when the plan falls apart. They've trained their nervous system to remain steady even when life is not. That steadiness is not a gift. It is built. You build it every time you do the opposite of what your craving demands. Every time you stay still when your emotions scream for action. Every time you walk away from ease in favor of truth. If you want to reclaim your power from your attachments, stop trying to think your way out. Live your way out. Choose one discomfort every day and face it. Skip a meal. Turn off your phone. Sit in silence. Tell yourself no. Do something that reminds your body that comfort is not a condition for peace. And then watch how your identity begins to shift. You're no longer the person who clings, you're the person who contains. You're no longer ruled by outcomes, you're anchored in self-respect. You stop living to avoid pain, and start living from a deeper strength that can hold pain without breaking. The truth is, attachment always begins with fear. And fear thrives in the assumption that you cannot survive without what you're clinging to. But you can. And when you know that, truly know it, not as an idea, but as something your body has tested and survived, you become free. Because the moment you no longer need to keep everything, you finally begin to keep yourself. 10. Reclaiming your inner throne, the psychology of self-sovereignty. We live in an age where emotions are easily manipulated. A cold glance, a vague message, a silent withdrawal, any one of these can throw our mood off balance. That is the problem. We've handed over control of our inner world to too many things outside ourselves. We allow others to press buttons and dictate how we feel, as if they have the right to determine our value, our peace, and our presence. This is not just dangerous, it is a deep surrender of sovereignty, emotional self-sovereignty. To reclaim your emotional sovereignty means to sit once again on the throne of your own mind. It means no one, not a person, not an event, not a mood, has the authority to rule your emotional state. No more, I'm angry because they ignored me, or I'm upset because they disrespected me. Instead, you say, I choose how I respond. I choose whether I stay in peace or react with pain. This is not about emotional suppression. It is not avoidance or cold detachment. On the contrary, those who are emotionally sovereign are often the most emotionally aware. They feel deeply, but they don't react blindly. They observe. They name what they feel. They allow it to exist, without letting it rule their behavior. They are not emotionally numb. They are emotionally self-possessed. Because when you truly own yourself, you no longer feel the need to defend an image. You simply protect your peace. Those who lack emotional sovereignty often live in reaction mode. Their state of mind is constantly at the mercy of others, what they say, do, ignore, or imply. Every compliment inflates them. Every criticism deflates them. They are pulled like a puppet by the opinions, actions, and moods of others. And with each emotional swing, they lose one more piece of their inner ground. The emotionally sovereign, however, respond differently. They speak when necessary, stay silent when wise. They don't explode to prove a point. They don't explain to be validated. They understand this, anyone can react, but only the self-mastered can stay still in a storm. They don't lose composure just because someone else lost theirs. They don't hand over their peace in exchange for approval. To build this sovereignty, begin with the smallest act of awareness, observation. Every time a feeling arises, pause. Don't move. Don't speak. Don't send a text. Just witness. I am angry. I am anxious. I feel unseen. Naming it breaks the trance. It creates a space between stimulus and response. And in that space, you reclaim choice. Mindfulness helps. It grounds you in the present moment, where emotional clarity lives. When you are mindful, you can distinguish between real emotion and conditioned reflex. You are no longer dragged into the past or thrown into the future. You are simply present. And from that presence, your responses become conscious, not automatic. But emotional sovereignty also requires a quiet kind of strength, a stable self-worth that doesn't rise and fall with external validation. You need to know who you are without needing others to affirm it. When you do, rejection no longer destabilizes you. Approval no longer intoxicates you. You still feel, you just don't collapse. And once you've tasted this sovereignty, there's no going back. You won't cling to people out of fear. You won't seek affirmation just to feel whole. You will say no without guilt. You will hold your silence without shame. You will walk away without burning inside. You will love, but not lose yourself. You will connect, but stay anchored. Because the one thing you guard most fiercely is no longer others' approval, but your inner throne, the seat of your self-command, where no one has permission to push buttons or pull strings. 11. Emotional reframe, from longing to liberation. Emotions are ever present, but also among the most misunderstood forces in our lives. When we long for someone or something, we often mistake that feeling for love, passion, or authenticity. But not always. Often, longing is the voice of lack. It is the symptom of an unseen wound. A fear of being abandoned, forgotten, unloved. And unless we're conscious, we will live our entire lives chasing that emotion, only to become its prisoner. Longing is not wrong. But if it's not reframed, it becomes bondage. It breeds attachment. It fuels desperation. It triggers reaction instead of intention. And worst of all, it convinces us that we need something outside ourselves in order to feel whole. That is where all inner suffering begins. So a shift must occur. A reversal within, from longing to liberation. From being pulled into emotion to stepping out of it. From asking, why don't they love me, to, what part of me have I abandoned? This is where emotional reframe begins, not by escaping the feeling, but by confronting it from a new angle. Not asking why this is happening to you, but what it's trying to teach through you. Not asking why they left, but asking what made you hand over your peace to begin with. Reframing doesn't mean lying to yourself. It's not pretending you're okay. It's the courage to face what you feel, but with different eyes. Pain isn't your enemy. It's a messenger. If someone hurt you, they didn't steal your worth, they triggered the part of you that forgot it. If you're longing for someone, it's not just about them, it's a mirror reflecting a place where you've yet to fully meet yourself. So begin by pausing. Don't rush to heal. Don't rush to act. Just sit with it. I miss them. I feel empty. I feel rejected. Then ask yourself, what am I really craving beneath this? You might find that it's not that person, not that moment. It's the deeper need to feel seen, to feel held, to feel unconditionally loved. And when you uncover that root, you can begin the shift. From there, you act differently. You don't chase to be chosen. You become the one who chooses. When loneliness comes, you don't call someone just to fill the silence. You return to the forgotten part of yourself. When you feel pain, you don't scream to be understood. You hold yourself with the strength that says, I don't need to be rescued. You rise, not to prove, but to choose. You begin to change, not for others, but because you're tired of being powerless. Each difficult emotion becomes a signal, not to drown, but to awaken. You no longer react, you reflect. You no longer cling, you reclaim. Slowly, your emotional patterns transform. And one day, you no longer need the pain to end, because something new has begun inside you. That's what liberation looks like. Not the absence of emotion, but the absence of emotional control. No one can press your buttons anymore. No one can leave and take your self-worth with them. No one can hurt you, unless you hand them the weapon. You'll still feel. You'll still miss. But you won't collapse. Because you're no longer a victim. You no longer ask, why me? You ask, what now? You don't wait for someone to change, you become the change. You don't hope to be saved, you become the one who saves yourself. Liberation isn't a place where emotion disappears. It's where you feel everything, but are owned by nothing. And to get there, all you need is one thing, the power to reframe. The will to see it differently. The choice to reclaim your own center. Not the person who hurt you. Not the story that broke you. But you, the one who turns pain into power, and reclaim your life as its rightful author. 12. The final lesson, choose inner peace over external validation. We live in a world where personal worth is increasingly measured by external approval. A like, a compliment, a glance of admiration can uplift us, but the absence of them can just as easily break us. Slowly, we begin to trade authenticity for attention. We mold ourselves to fit into expectations, not because it's who we are, but because it makes us feel seen. But the price of that trade is painfully clear: we lose ourselves. External validation is not inherently bad. The danger lies in dependency. When our moods swing according to how others react, when we begin altering our words, our actions, even our values to win agreement, we are no longer living a life of truth, but a performance designed for applause. There is no exhaustion like pretending to be someone you're not. There is no emptiness like being admired for a mask. And there is no deeper pain than realizing you've spent your energy being everything for everyone, except yourself. Inner peace, the thing we're all silently seeking, does not come from being loved. It comes from being real. From the alignment between how you feel inside and how you show up outside. From having the courage to say no when necessary. From standing alone when your values diverge. From walking away from a relationship even when love remains, because it no longer honors your self-respect. The truth is, you don't need to be loved to live. You need to be true, or else you're only surviving inside a version of yourself designed to be accepted. We're often taught that love is a reward. That if we're good enough, smart enough, beautiful enough, agreeable enough, we'll be loved. But real love doesn't ask you to shrink or shapeshift. And inner peace doesn't begin with, do they love me? It begins with, am I betraying myself to keep them? Choosing inner peace is an act of courage. It's not about withdrawing from the world, it's about declaring, I don't live to be agreed with. I live to be in integrity. When you live like this, you begin to attract relationships that require no effort to maintain. You begin to do things that don't need praise to feel meaningful. You begin to say things that don't need to be polished to be right. Those who live for validation fear rejection. But those who choose inner peace do not. They are willing to be misunderstood if that's the price of staying true. Because they understand, as Seneca wrote, he who is brave is free. The brave are free, not because life is easy, but because they no longer belong to other people's opinions. They no longer belong to expectations. They belong to themselves. That kind of freedom isn't immediate. It takes time. It shows up when you stay silent rather than say something that goes against your truth. When you stop chasing a group that never really accepted you. When you tell the truth even if it's unpopular. When you leave, even though your heart wants to stay, because staying means abandoning your soul. Every day, we face a choice: continue living for recognition, or live for truth. One path leads to constant internal chaos no matter how much you achieve. The other, though lonelier at times, is the only road to true alignment between your mind, your body, and your values. You don't need the world to approve of you. You just need one person, the one in the mirror, to look at you without shame, without pretending, without self-betrayal. When you have that internal approval, you no longer need external validation. When you are truly living your values, you have nothing left to prove. Your presence is enough. Remember, the cost of external approval may be your soul. But the reward of truth is that you'll never again feel hollow in a room full of applause. Truth doesn't need to be praised, it just needs to be lived. And that is the final lesson, but the most vital one. You don't need to be loved to live. You need to be real to live right. Thank you for staying until the end. That alone means you're no longer willing to live on autopilot, and you're ready to return to your real power. This world won't pause to validate you. But you can pause to validate yourself. And that's the only kind of recognition that brings real peace. You don't need to be perfect to be worthy. You don't need to stand out to be seen. You don't need to please the world, to live in truth. You only need one thing: courage. The courage to live honestly. The courage to stand alone. The courage to walk away from what no longer honors your truth, even if it costs you approval. Seneca once said, "He who is brave is free." The brave don't wait for permission to be themselves. They live it. And in doing so, they find freedom. If today you chose truth over validation, that's already a victory. No one needs to see it, you are enough. Don't forget to like, share, and comment if this message reached you. And I'll see you in the next video, where you'll be reminded again. You don't need to be loved to live. You need to be real to live right.